I'm introducing Mr. Mac Hall. He's the founder and executive director for the National Indian Leadership Project. He is Cherokee. His educational background, he has a master's from Arizona State University. He has teacher certification in social sciences, and actually has a BA from Western Washington University, where I used to work. And I welcome him. He has years of experience to share. He is the developer of this intervention. It's an evidence-based intervention, and he'll be talking more about that. And I look forward to the presentation and the questions afterwards. Welcome, everyone.
Okay, well, thank you for that introduction. I guess we'll jump right in. The presentation is about Project Venture. It is an evidence-based program recognized by SAMHSA and NREP with a Model Program Award in 2005. I'm trying to change the slides, but it's not going. Okay, here we go. So the learning objectives for the presentation are, number one, the participants would gain a working knowledge of Project Venture as an evidence-based intervention with tribal youth. The second objective is that the participants would have an understanding of the general implementation process that needs to be in place prior to implementing Project Venture. And that the third objective is that the participants will be prepared to make a determination to utilize Project Venture in their own communities based on lessons learned over the last 25 plus years and the services that National Indian Youth Leadership Project provides. So we'll go here. This is just a little bit of background information about the National Indian Youth Leadership Project, which is the parent organization of Project Venture. We incorporated in New Mexico in the late 80s, 87 I believe it was, and we have an all-native board. Our board chair is Dr. Beulah Allen, who was one of the first Navajo women to become a doctor and retired from Indian Health Service several years ago. And the program was developed with a lot of guidance from Native elders in the way we put the program together, and we'll talk more about what sort of advice they gave us later on. But primarily it was to use a positive approach to develop resilient young people, and we took that wisdom and built the highest level of evidence-based programs in the country with that. So we're especially proud of that. And Project Venture has been internationally recognized. We have approximately 12 sites across Canada now too, in cooperation with Public Safety Canada and the National Center for Crime Prevention. Let's see here. So a little bit about the credentials of NIYLP. We did develop Project Venture, which is the first native developed evidence-based program to come on the scene. It's a positive youth development approach, and it's recognized by SAMHSA and also by NREP, and we're on the list of proven promising practices with OJJDP and other agencies as well. We've had a fair amount of national recognition for our project. In 2001, we received the Exemplary Program Award from the state of New Mexico for our substance abuse prevention program, and that sort of put us on the map for further climbing the ladder of recognition. 2002, we received the Promising Program Award from the Center for Substance Abuse Prevention. And in 2003, we received the Effective Program Award from the Center for Substance Abuse Prevention. And then in 2005, we were given the Model Program Award, which is the highest level of recognition that that SAMHSA has at that time. And with that, accepting that award came the agreement to replicate the model if somebody wanted to do that. So that's when we committed to doing that. So also in 2007, we received a milestone program recognition from the Kellogg Foundation for their 75th anniversary. They identified several programs around the world that they had funded, and we were one of their milestone programs. And in 2008, there was this exemplary program recognition from the First Nations Behavioral Health Association, which Paulette was associated with at that time, I think. And let me see if I can move. There we go. Also, the National High-Risk Youth Study that SAMHSA conducted, we were identified as the most effective program for Native youth in that study. The High-Risk Youth Study actually had about 50 CSAP-funded projects, Center for Substance Abuse Prevention projects, and about 10,000 kids in that study. So we made a big impression in that study because we had outcomes that lasted beyond the year of the study, and I think 18 and 24-month follow-up, we still had significant outcomes from the study. We also received, about that time, another recognition from First Nations Behavioral Health Association as a best practice for American Indian, Alaska Native, and Pacific Island Indigenous youth. We do have projects in Hawaii also, and recognition by the National Center for the Prevention of Crime in Canada. So a lot of people want to know, well, exactly what is Project Venture. So we're gonna attempt to break it down here a little bit. The project, as it's implemented in its pure form, has an in-school component to it, has an after-school component, a weekend component, and then camps and summer program. And it's targeted at Native kids at the mid-school level, although there is a component for high school mentors, which is an opportunity for kids once they pass through the program and go into high school, they can continue working with us. We strive to get at least 150 to 200 hours of contact over the course of a year with a particular cohort of kids. So, and that was one of the things that came out of the National High-Risk Youth Study, was that threshold of 150 to 200 hours appears to be really important, and was contained in the most effective programs in the National High-Risk Youth Study. But we were already doing that before the study identified that number. So the program is based on outdoor adventure. That's the major approach that we use with kids, getting them reconnected to the natural world and getting them outdoors, and magical stuff happens out there. So the culturally based group development process is something that we are especially proud of, that we've developed over the years. Developing a set of positive norms with the kids we work with, and getting them to buy into that and adopt that in their own personal lives, as well as in the group activities when they come together. There's a strong service learning component to Project Venture. We try to instill an ethic of service in kids, that they understand that giving something back to their communities is critically important and part of their culture and practice that goes back thousands of years. And we have focused on both qualitative and quantitative evaluation approaches over the years. And our evaluator was coming kind of from a qualitative point of view, but we had to meet the requirements of our funders and the instruments that they ask us to use. So we have really solid data, both qualitative and quantitative, as far as the outcomes of Project Venture going back over 25 years. So we've identified what we call the guiding principles of Project Venture, and those are helping connect kids back to the natural world. As I mentioned before, we do a lot of outdoor adventure activities. That's the best metaphor for real life issues that kids are dealing with, and we can address a lot of those in the outdoors and through the activities that we use. We use a strength-based approach, which really talks about young people being assets and potential resources for our communities to improve the quality of life in that community, and we have to invest in our young people to help bring about that positive change that we want to see. And so experiential learning is our approach. Learning by doing, hands-on, really testing yourself out in the natural world and getting outside your comfort zone and trying things that you never dreamed that you would ever end up doing, rappelling off a cliff or rock climbing or a raft trip down the river or whatever it might turn out to be, has proven to be the most effective way to engage young people in their own learning and help them have an active role in their own learning. We mentioned the ethic of service, that service is a traditional Native value that appears everywhere that we know of and in some form. And so we've spent a lot of time working with kids on going back and discovering the language around service in their own community and what does it look like and what's the language for service, how do they describe it in their own culture, and what are some contemporary examples of how service plays out in a Native community today as opposed to 100 years ago. It's still there, it's still got a name, there's language around it, and so we're actively encouraging kids to go and discover that for themselves and get involved in it. And then the last of the guiding principles is the connection building to their family, their community, and their culture. And so I always have a kind of a visual image in my head of the astronauts out on the space shuttle where they're out floating out preparing the space shuttle, and they're only attached to one thin line that's holding them on. And if that were to break, they would drift away and never to be seen again. And so we have that situation in our communities today where we have a lot of kids that are just holding on by a small thread. And if we could multiply that and have them connected to 5 or 8 different things, their program, their culture, their language, their family, whatever it might be, we would drastically reduce the chance of losing all these kids that we're losing. So there's a really critical need to connect, and building that connection is the language that you see in a lot of the suicide prevention literature now. And I just wanted to spend a second talking about this photograph at the bottom of the page here that shows all these prayer flags. It looks like that's exactly what they were intended to look like. But these are actually T-shirts from 35 years of camps and other programs that we've done with kids over the last 35 years. The oldest one on this string of prayer flags that goes back to 1982 at Cherokee Nation in Oklahoma, where we started our first camp. The camp's been going for 35 years, and every one of these, there's over 100 of these, and every one of them represents anywhere from 20 to 50 kids or more. So that's thousands of kids represented by these flags. So I just wanted to explain why that photograph is there. One of the things that really I think I'm especially proud of with our organization and with Project Venture is that we have an all-native staff, and they're extremely well-trained facilitators. The average, well, we'll talk about that. They're all native people from different tribes. They have a high level of cultural competency and have been working with kids for a long, long time, have a lot of outdoor skills and certifications. Every one of our staff is certified wilderness first responder level, which is the next thing to EMT level as far as medical training goes, and they're really competent in taking care of other people's kids and making sure they come back all in one piece, and they're aware of the positive youth development approach and have those skills of working with kids and taking that positive approach that we really emphasize. The average length of time of our key staff is 10 to 15 years, so they've been on the job doing this kind of work, and we have had Project Venture in 27 states now, I think, and we have 12 projects across Canada and several in Hawaii. And so they've developed not only as expert facilitators, but now they're expert trainers as well. And we're doing trainings all over the country and all over North America. In the last 6 months, we've trained over 200 people in our 3.5-day training program. So we'll move on here. Where has Project Venture been implemented? I just covered that a little bit. Over 25 states since the year 2000, 8 Canadian provinces, Hawaii on several, 3 or 4 islands. We actually have a Project Venture implementation in Hungary where somebody got the idea of adapting our model to work with Roma gypsy kids in Hungary, and so we went to Budapest and trained a whole group of facilitators, and that program is still going. As I understand it, they keep in touch with us, and Project Venture has been implemented in schools, in community-based programs, alternative schools, treatment centers, juvenile diversion programs, camps, and other kinds of settings. So it's really versatile and can be used in a lot of different kind of settings with various risk levels of kids. And this graphic that we included here was just to represent Turtle Island, because we're covering North America now pretty well with Project Venture programs. So that graphic seemed like it was appropriate. I'm having a problem. Oh, here we go. Okay. Culturally tailoring Project Venture. We get a lot of questions about how to implement culture in Project Venture and how does it happen. So Project Venture provides a framework whereby a new community can step in and receive the training and take it from there and develop their own sort of unique approach. And Project Venture is based on universal native values that are common across tribal groups. And so at our camps, we might have 10 or 15 different tribes represented. So we encourage everybody to, talk about and share their own cultural beliefs and practices with the other kids around them, but also we design the program around those values that are universal to Aboriginal communities everywhere. And when we have kids, our last big camp where we had over 100 middle school kids, there were kids from Canada, Hawaii, and all over the U.S. together for 8 days out in the woods, and it's just such an awesome experience. So the local group that decides to implement Project Venture provides the cultural content, and through our training, you kind of get a good sense of where to plug these cultural pieces in, and then in your own community, you plug in your own cultural content based on language and customs and the natural environment and the seasonal cycles, ceremonial cycles, subsistence activities, and the unique rites of passage ceremonies that take place in different communities. So those are all key ingredients of developing a high-quality Project Venture program. So the Project Venture staff, we do a lot of coaching with new sites on how to implement specific cultural content and language, and there's an international network of Project Venture sites available to everyone to share ideas, what worked, what didn't work, some of the unique things that they've tried to do. And so there's a support system that goes way beyond the Project Venture staff here in New Mexico. We have people from Canada talking to people in Hawaii or in Idaho or Oklahoma or wherever it might happen to be. So we have a set of positive norms and more or less guidelines for how we interact with each other when we come together, and we call it the full value commitment, but it could be, you could use any term for it, but what we've done basically is translated that into several native languages. It's been translated into Navajo, into Lakota, it's in Native Hawaiian language, Ojibwe, and I think there's a couple others that, so that the kids can really resonate with what this means from their own cultural point of view. We did a training in one Navajo community a few years ago, and we had budgeted about 30 minutes for that discussion about the language and trying to translate it. And when people got into it, that conversation took off and lasted about 2 hours, and we had to just go with it because it was so amazing. And it really connected the people to the concepts that we were trying to introduce. So pretty amazing. Let me see here. Okay. So we'll get into a little bit more detail now about what the program actually looks like in operation as it's implemented. The in-school piece of it, what we try to do is connect with a teacher who will allow us to come in for one class period during the week to work with a group of kids. And it could be, we've had a lot of good success with PE classes, and we've had health classes, we've had science classes, whoever we can connect with in the school that sees the value and the potential of this in terms of the impact on the kids and classroom management and all the other aspects. So one class period a week, 45 to 60 minutes. We would get into some team building activities, group problem solving, group decision making. All these activities can be done in a classroom with a creative facilitator. And we introduce themes, and we also connect our themes to the academic curriculum. We can work with a teacher and identify what they're working on that week in the academic subject area, and then tie our activities to that and frame our activities around that that theme that they're working on already, and hopefully reinforce and strengthen what they're working on in the academic curriculum. So it really does help change classroom environment. We've had a number of teachers who wanted to become volunteers and work with us and go on weekend activities with us and stuff because they were so impressed with how it changes the environment in the classroom. You don't have kids bouncing off the walls anymore. They're actually cooperating, working together, and solving problems together. And it's a really amazing transformation that takes place. And we've recruited some of our strongest volunteers from teachers who have seen our work in the classroom. And then also the in-school piece is can be a recruiting opportunity for the after-school program. So when we're working with the kids in the classroom, we can say, well, come after school on Wednesdays. We'll be going rock climbing or mountain biking or whatever it happens to be, and so it helps us with our recruiting. So when we talked about the 150 to 200 hours over the course of a year, this in-school piece makes up about 20 to 30 of those hours, assuming that you have close to 60 minutes in a classroom period. So about a percentage of that 150 to 200 hours that we're talking about comes from the in-school program. Trying to change the slide here. Okay. And we included in here kind of a sample lesson plan, like what would this look like in a classroom. And so we just chose a theme of creating a safe environment. So we have kids gather and circle up in the center of a room, and we talk about the concept of circles and why are they culturally significant to Native people. Why don't Native people line up in rows sitting in desks like the teacher wants you to do every day in her classroom? So we talk about the concept of circles and why they're important. And there's an amazing quote from Black Elk who talks about how the power moves in circles everywhere in the universe, and the seasons and all of those kinds of things. And then he talks about how even the birds build their nests in circles because they have the same religion as ours. I always thought that was such a cool quote, but there's a lot of cultural significance to the notion of a circle, and so we talk about that. And we introduce the concept in this typical lesson. We're going to introduce the concept of what your comfort zone is and what it looks like and what happens when you step out of it. And so we have a representation of your comfort zone, what we call the stretch zone, where you're out of your comfort zone but not quite to the point of panic. And then there's a panic zone designated also with concentric circles on the floor. So, and then we come up with some examples and various scenarios and ask students to physically place themselves in the appropriate area based on their reaction to that scenario that we introduce. So if you're comfortable with it, then you would probably stay where you are in your comfort zone. But if you're going to be stretched a bit, then you would move to that area so we can graphically see kind of where everybody's at. And then if there's something that really freaks people out, we would have a couple of people with their toe in the panic zone if we're talking about rattlesnakes or something like that. So it's kind of a fun activity, and then there's a reflection and debriefing discussion afterwards, and the facilitator has been observing what went on and has a pretty good idea now of how kids would react to certain things. A lot of them are not comfortable too much in the outdoors, and so we're kind of getting a feel for where kids are at before we actively start working with them. And our goal is to ensure that we don't put anybody in the panic situation, but we do ask them to stretch beyond what they're comfortable with, because the research seems to show that most powerful learning takes place in that kind of stretch zone where you're out there a little bit. So, okay, so the after-school program is an in-depth follow-up to what we did in school that week, and we have a lesson plan that we'll go through, and these are 1 to 2 hour sessions that happen once a week or more, depending on how you can structure it. So if you picked up 20 some hours from the in-school, you're going to pick up about 50 more over the course of a school year with the after-school program. So you're almost halfway there to that magic number of 150 to 200 with your in-school and after-school program. So this one, 1 to 2 hour sessions, maybe once a week or more. And here we're introducing students to outdoor activities and equipment. Examples, one of the things that our staff is really good at is teaching Aboriginal fire making, use of map and compass and GPS, introducing the kids to the camping gear, getting actual hands-on practice, setting up tents. We have a whole course on leave no trace camping, and one of the really interesting pieces of that curriculum is a chart that shows how long it takes different materials in nature to break down, all the way from a disposable diaper to a glass bottle or something like that. We also focus on cultural activities and have community elders come in and speak to the kids and stuff. And so a lot of the after school is more time, a bigger time block, and gives you more time to get it more in depth with different topics and prepare the kids for what is going to come up next. If I can get my slide to change here. Okay, this is a typical after-school lesson plan, just kind of randomly selected, that we call Where in the World, and it's an introduction to orienteering. And orienteering, for those of you who don't know, is basically teaching the kids how to use a map and a compass or a GPS to find your way around in the world. And it's a skill that everybody ought to know. We introduce topographic maps, which are the ones that get into quite a bit of detail and show changes in elevation and contours and scale and all those things that you need to understand to read maps. And we have kids practicing in small groups with a compass, looking for locations that we've identified on the map. And sometimes they're challenged to locate a stash of snacks by following at least 3 coordinates to get you to the place where X marks the spot where the snacks are. So, or your lunch, you can hide their lunch and have them find it. Or, and then there's a lot of activities. All the activities have reflection time built in. So we sit down and kind of debrief what happened and how did it go and what did we learn from it. And with a lot of these activities, it's really important to help the kids connect to the learning that took place. And what did we learn from that we could utilize in other aspects of our life, back at home, in school, whatever it might be. So that reflection piece is really, really critical. You would never take kids on an activity like where you would be rappelling off a cliff or something and then not sit down and talk about that afterwards and help them draw the meaning out of it. You miss an incredible learning opportunity if you were to do that. Okay, and then the weekend programs. These are more in-depth. These are a whole day or maybe even an overnighter with 2 days or parts of 2 days. And these are outdoor adventure outings usually. Rock climbing, mountain biking, kayaking, canoeing. Here in New Mexico, we do a kayak trip on the Rio Grande that's really awesome. Kids really not only learn how to use the equipment, but see some natural habitat for wild animals and birds, and learn a lot of new skills and new language to describe the skills that they're learning. And we did a camp last summer in Idaho where we did a whitewater rafting trip and kayaking, and the kids learned so much from that. We had 2 different tribes from Idaho brought kids to that camp, and it's always amazing utilizing whatever natural environment there is to available. And also the weekend programs can include cultural activities, powwows and ceremonies and different kinds of things, and practice with the outdoor equipment, so that if we're picking up, let's say, 25 hours over the course of a year from the in-school and about 50 from the out-of-school, and then the weekend activities are usually 8 to 12 or more hours. So you can see there how you're accumulating these hours, and this group is really bonding together around a set of positive norms and around a set of positive behavioral expectations from each other. And so it's quite the opposite from a gang. It's really structured, and the kids are monitoring each other and themselves in terms of positive behavior. It's pretty amazing to see. Come on here. Okay, so this is a typical weekend lesson plan where, let's say we're going to take some kids rock climbing, and so the youth are already familiar with the gear from the after-school program. We've already introduced the harnesses and the helmets and the ropes and the hardware that goes along with rock climbing. And so the staff has thoroughly scouted out an area and set it up so that there's no loose rocks, and we've eliminated all the dangerous stuff that could possibly happen, and set up the area so that it'll be safe. And each young person puts on the equipment, the harness, the helmet. They get inspected by at least one or more staff for making sure their equipment's on properly and making sure they have the right shoes on or the right clothing. Make sure that we're not inviting an accident. People with long hair have to tie up their hair and make sure that that doesn't get caught up in anything, and things like that. We introduce the terms to be used when they start getting ready to climb. They're on a belay system, that's a safety system that prevents them from falling, and we get the language down on what you say when you're ready to go and all that, and do a safety review. And then there's really positive peer support for this activity. One person climbs at a time, and the rest are all encouraging them and helping them to have a successful, positive experience with it. So it's just reinforcing that positive energy and a positive approach to everything, where the glass is half full instead of half empty. We're always looking at bringing the positive elements into what we're doing. Let me get to the next slide here. There's a little time delay here on my computer for some reason. There we go. So this one has to do with prevention outcomes. As I mentioned, we've been doing this for 25 years now, and so we've had amazing, statistically significant outcomes in terms of substance abuse prevention. We've also adapted Project Venture to develop a teen pregnancy approach that's culturally appropriate and age appropriate to mid-school kids, and we've branched off a little bit and worked with some of the early high school years with the Teen Pregnancy Grant. And the Teen Pregnancy Grant is not really about condoms and safe sex and stuff like that as much as it is around what does a healthy relationship look like to begin with. That's the starting point, is how do we engage in a healthy relationship, and what should we look for in our friends, and how to avoid those kind of situations where especially young women get pulled into relationships that are where they're over their head and they don't want to go there necessarily, but they get pulled into those kind of relationships. So we've spent a lot of time on that. We had a 5-year grant from the Office of Adolescent Health, and we have a whole curriculum on the Project Venture approach to teen pregnancy that's really cool. We've also had outcomes in suicide prevention and other related areas. 25 years really of outcomes in resiliency related areas by tweaking Project Venture in different ways. Okay, come on. Okay, when we put this together, we looked at, from a Project Venture point of view, what are some of the behavioral outcomes that we have listed in our curriculum, and we'll go through those, and then we have another set that I'll talk to you about after that. The culturally based group development process, building trust and helping kids get comfortable. A lot of the activities we start out with doing different exercises where we want the kids to begin to get more comfortable with being uncomfortable, because we have to go through some things to get you to a place where you're ready to be uncomfortable and be okay with that. And so this culturally based process is amazingly well facilitated by Native people, and the kids really get into it. So we talk about that full value commitment and how that works. It's basically being here, being present, not having an iPhone plugged into your ears or whatever. We're totally tuned in with each other and being respectful and listening and no distractions. Being safe, obviously. We do a lot of high-risk activities that require an emphasis on safety. Speak your truth is one of the elements of this full value commitment, and young people want to speak their truth, and the only conditions we put on that is that they have to be positive and constructive with each other and can't just attack somebody and be negative. So setting goals is obviously individual and group goals. And then the last one is probably the most important, let go and move on. When there's been a disagreement or some tension or something like that, we try to resolve it and then let go and move on. And I was watching a thing on CNN last night, and there was an African-American guy interviewing people at Standing Rock and at Pine Ridge and places like that, and they were sort of educating him on what some of the Native issues were, and the subject of Custer came up, and one of the Native women said, "Well, we're still being punished for killing Custer," and then the black guy said, "Come on, white people, let it go," and I thought that was really appropriate. I mean, it happened 100 and some years ago. It's time to probably let it go and move on. So this has to do also with historical trauma issues and how we see kids walking around with this backpack full of stuff that they don't need to be carrying. They've inherited that from somewhere, and we want to somehow empower them to let go of a lot of that stuff and not be carrying that around. So anyway, this is important, and you have to kind of see it to see how it plays out. And then talking about healthy relationships, defining what a healthy relationship looks like and talking about it, and maybe getting people to question their own relationships right now and how healthy are they, and do they want to be in that relationship, and those kinds of things. And communicating and listening intentionally. This is really important for young people to learn how to listen and communicate effectively and intentionally and say what you mean. And group problem solving and decision making is another aspect of this, learning the skills to work as a group and not just jump in and tell everybody what to do, but do it in a democratic sort of process. And asking for and giving help is a whole other area that we really focus on. And yeah, it's something that has to be practiced. And so emotional health is another topic, and then our body language. How do we, kind of message are we conveying with our body language? So there's a lot of really interesting stuff going on here. Topics for conversation for a whole year, definitely. Could take you that long to get through all of this stuff. So we're going to look at middle school wellness behavioral outcomes. I took this from a document that I read through about wellness courts and some of the outcomes that they look for, and I adapted this specifically to middle school kids because a lot of the outcomes they had were more higher level, like workforce development related and stuff like that. So these were sort of singled out as things that kids could work on at the mid-school level. So we have social competence, long and short term. A lot of overlap with the previous slide. School attendance and grades, those are all things that we want to see moving in a positive direction. Family functioning and relationships. These are all things that a wellness court-based program could really work on. Pro-social behavior, obviously substance abuse reduction or elimination, gang resistance, cultural pride and skill building, and then the positive community involvement. These were all outcomes that would fit right in with the Project Venture program, but also with the wellness court kind of environment. So we thought it was important to include these in there. Okay, this is a little bit about rites of passage. What we've done in our program over the last 20-some years is really taken a close look at gender-specific rites of passage ceremonies, and we don't actually do those ceremonies, but we take the content from what we've been able to learn about those ceremonies and what adults talk to their kids about in those ceremonies, and incorporate that into our curriculum. And so at our camps, we have, in the evening, we have the boys and men going off together and having conversation about some of those kinds of things. And the women and girls go off and talk about their corresponding stuff. And so it's been really interesting because we're obviously noticing that the ceremonies themselves are not being practiced at the level that they were 20 or 50 years ago, and it's really fading out, and whether parents are not prepared financially to put it on when it's time to have happen or whatever, but we're seeing fewer and fewer kids nowadays that are actually getting the benefit of those ceremonies. And so we're doing our best to capture the key teachings from those ceremonies and incorporate those into our curriculum. So talking with young people about how their roles and responsibilities change from when you're no longer considered a kid, but you're a young adult now, and talking about respect and healthy relationships and all those kinds of transitional kinds of things. So we're very aware of those and making sure that we're covering that content as much as we can. Let's see here. So when a new community decides that they're interested in Project Venture, we have a kind of a readiness checklist that we work with people on, and I'll just hit some of the highlights of that. It's more complicated, and it's actually in one of the handouts that you can download. There's a document that's several pages long that looks at the readiness assessment. And so we look at things like, is there a plan in place to implement Project Venture? Has someone from the community attended Project Venture training? Do you have funding in place that can support a program? There's also, one of the handouts is kind of a sample budget that you can look at to see what it would actually cost you to put your program together and run it for a year, depending on where you are. Do you have the key partnerships in place with the schools or communities? Do you have MOUs? Can you get MOUs? some of our sites over the years have really had a struggle with trying to partner with the school. Some communities just can't get that part together. The school won't let them in or whatever. And so we've had some Project Venture programs that were actually community-based rather than school-based, just because of the historical relationship with the schools wasn't positive enough to make something happen. Do the key people that are involved in your program understand positive youth development? You know, that's a critical question. And do you have qualified staff, and do you have the right people? And what I mean by the right people is, by over the last 25 years, I can almost tell you after 5 or 10 minutes of talking to somebody whether the program's going to work or not, because of whether they have that sort of positive orientation, or is their orientation more kind of punitive and authoritarian and old school, boarding school kind of mentality. That generally doesn't work well. And so another area would be whether you have elders and cultural experts available to the program to provide some of that critical cultural input. And then some kind of lessons learned, I guess, of doing this for a long time. We've learned several things that are sort of critical, and building capacity to support and sustain a program over a minimum of 3 to 5 years is what we look for with Project Venture. And there's really got to be community buy-in and support. You've really got to use culturally appropriate approaches that resonate with your community. Evaluation approaches that are culturally appropriate also. We've done a lot of work in that area, and our evaluator that we've had for over 20 years is just retired, but she's still available to talk to people about how to set up their evaluation. And again, having the right staff. I've just talked to a program over the weekend that spent the last 3 years with not the right staff, and now they're struggling, and I'm trying to help them figure out, well, where do you go from here? You have to make a decision probably and let somebody go, and then get somebody else in there if you want to salvage the program. And so that's a really key thing. I mentioned multi-year grants. If you're going to really do Project Venture, you're looking at 3 to 5 years of funding as a requirement, because it takes that long to really set a program up and get it working right, get results, prove yourself to the community, and those kinds of things. And so coaching and mentoring is what we try to provide to help you be successful, and we're pretty good at that as long as people are honest and upfront with us and tell us what's really going on. We can probably help, because we've seen it all over 25 years. We've seen just about everything that can happen, good and bad. So the biggest challenges, go through that really quickly. Again, getting multi-year funding, 3 to 5 years, getting the community buy-in, MOUs, agreements in place. You got to have something that's bulletproof, that will stay in place regardless of changes in tribal leadership or school leadership. That's one of the biggest negative things that comes along, is a new administration comes in and kicks everybody out and starts over again, and then your program could get swept out along with that. Does the community have a shared vision for youth? And that's really an important one. And focus on long-term sustainability from day one. That's my recommendation. If you get 3 to 5 years of funding, you really got to be thinking from year one about what's going to happen after that 5 years. Can we integrate this into the school budget? Can we find ways to keep it going so that we don't lose all that we've invested? And then fidelity to the model, and really sticking with what Project Venture is all about. again, we've had some programs that instead of outdoor adventure, they were playing hockey or doing some recreational program, and that's not really what Project Venture is. And you have to come back and say, hey, wait a minute, you haven't maintained your fidelity to the model here. So those are some of the challenges that people run into. Let me go to the next slide here. Okay. And we have kind of a unique perspective on this because we've been working with replication for about 20 years now. We have over 25 years experience in implementing Project Venture and helping others replicate it. We've developed a curriculum for in-school, after-school, weekend, and summer. We've been doing a camp for 35 years. We've developed a really high-quality training approach and been doing that for 15 years, and this readiness assessment tool is available for you all to look at. So we'll move on here. So we have a perspective on all of this. I was on SAMHSA's expert panel for over 10 years. I was probably the biggest pain in the neck in the room when I come to meetings because I would ask questions about, well, why are we still doing stuff that really doesn't work very well? And that makes people uncomfortable, but you have to ask those questions. And so I was on SAMHSA's and the Action Alliance American and Alaska Native Suicide Prevention Task Force for 5 years, and the One Sky Center before that for 5 years. And so I spend a lot of time researching what works and looking at how do we avoid doing those things that don't work or produce only minimal results. And so that's a little bit of our perspective on some of this stuff. Trying to change the slide here. So what we offer is basically direct service programming. We work with probably 500 at least kids in different schools here in New Mexico. We also help communities write grants and deliver Project Venture in schools and communities. We assist tribes and schools and communities in replicating. We offer customized training and TA and coaching, and we'll even help you write your grant if you need help with that. And we do a lot of presentations at national and international conferences. And as I mentioned before, we have a highly skilled staff of Native people that have been doing this a long time, and they really know what they're doing. So the project, we have just a little bit about the curriculum. Our brand new curriculum is just coming out. It has detailed lesson plans for the school year, for in-school, after-school, day-long and multi-day trips, and helps the local community understand integrating culture and language and all that. And we have a Project Venture implementation guide and a new facilitator guide that we just developed. And we'll move on here real quick. So this is just a little plug. I guess I can read through this unless Paulette wants to, but we're going to be doing a part 2 of this, which will be a peer-to-peer learning, and it's a panel of individuals who have successfully implemented Project Venture in tribal communities, and the grantees will share their lessons learned along with challenges and successes and discuss how they've sustained Project Venture beyond the initial implementation and have the opportunity to ask questions. And the 2 communities that will be on this panel will be Rosebud, which is a program that's run by the Native American Advocacy Program, which is a nonprofit based at Rosebud, and then the Porcupine School on Pine Ridge, which has been implementing Project Venture for 2 years now, and one of our staff is actually living up there most of the time and helping mentor a local community member who's eventually going to take that program over. So that's coming up in July, I believe, and this is our contact information, how you can reach us, and I think at this time we have a question period of time to ask questions.
Well, you might, Mac, this is Paulette.
Yeah.
You might want to go ahead and run through the handouts that are available for download there on the screen.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. The handouts. Do they all have this on their screen too? The presentations
Yes, they
listed
do.
like I do. Okay. So
Mm-hmm.
we've put several documents in here for you all to download if you're interested. There's some sample lesson plans from our curriculum for us in school, after school, single day outings. There's a sample. This is kind of let's see. There's an implementation guide. There's a project venture estimated budget that helps you kind of figure out what it might cost to run your program. And that's pretty standard, except that if you have programs like in Alaska or Canada where they're really remote, you probably multiply your budget times 2 or 3 depending on what it costs to get everything from fuel to food to supplies to whatever, however remote you are. So we've got a number of different things here. There's the PowerPoint presentation that I just went through is on here. So there's a lot to look at, and we hope that will help anybody who's really interested to get more detail on what's involved.
Great. Thank you, Mac. I think we're ready for question and answers. If anybody would like to go ahead and enter their questions in the box, and we'll do our best to get you an answer. I think Anna here noted that this will be archived, so if someone is watching this at a later date, we can mail these out, both the presentation as well as the handouts.
Oh, good. Okay.
And so that'll be available down the road if somebody missed it as well. So we'll have that available on our website. And I had a question. I don't know if it even popped up. I was wondering if you could speak to the gender role issue that you identified, Mac, since it is an experiential learning program focusing on outdoorsy kinds of activities. I wondered how that plays out in terms of engaging girls in that process.
Well, yeah, okay, that's a good question, and we've actually seen that a lot of the girls really do better in the outdoor setting than you would imagine, and better than the boys in some cases. So we've done a lot of trips where we've had only girls going and only boys, but most of the times our programs are co-ed, and again, it's about kind of an experiential opportunity to work on that, healthy relationships and respect and supporting each other in positive ways and things like that. So, yeah, it's the girls have actually shown some amazing skills and perseverance in doing a lot of the outdoor stuff that maybe people wouldn't think they would, but you'd be surprised.
Mm-hmm. So there isn't a sense of conflict or competition between the boys and girls. That doesn't, with your
there's always a little bit of that. When the boys are always kind of macho and want to show off a little bit, but actually a lot of the girls are really good at climbing, and you just you'd be surprised at how the dynamics work out, and we've set such a positive tone with our staff and the way we approach things. So it's it's a matter of kind of, you know, learning what the healthy relationship looks like and leaving some of that inappropriate stuff behind when they come out with us.
Now, that's a great approach. I don't know of any other intervention, whether it be American Indian focused or not, that addresses that issue so well. I just wanted to ask one other quick question. I don't see any others popping up right now. But I wondered about talking a bit about the high school mentors and the high school curriculum and how that is a, you know, a piece of Project Venture.
Well, in a kind of regular Project Venture progression from starting up a new program, it would take you a few years before you would actually have graduates of your program get into high school. So so a lot of the times the new startup programs are going to be going to the high school looking for kids with some leadership ability to bring into their program. They're not going to be the homegrown ones because that takes a couple years before you get some of your kids that move on into high school. But you can bring in kids who haven't been in the program, and you almost have to have a separate sort of training track for them. But that can be done. And then after the first couple of years, you have your you have a core group of kids who've come up through your program who are now in high school and know the whole routine and have been trained and understand the philosophy and all of that stuff. So that's the ideal way, is to grow your own. But if you can't, when you're first starting out, you look for kids that have the same values and they're reliable and they're positive and they can be trusted, and then you recruit them and get them some additional training so you can multiply yourself. Because most of the programs that, when they're starting out, really don't have enough. The adult staff are stretched pretty thin. You know, you only have maybe one full-time person or two half-time or something like that in your staff. So you've got to figure out a way to have a better ratio of leaders to young people, and so those high school kids really help you with that. They can be junior level staff, and you can work with more kids that way if you have a group that is well trained and you can rely on them. Then that really makes it a lot easier.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Mac, we do have another question here. Aaron is asking, does the readiness assessment or staff assist grantees on choosing which approach would be best for the community, the in-school, after-school, the summer?
Well, all of those components are actually part of the whole Project Venture model. They're not separate types of Project Venture programs. The ideal Project Venture program has all those components: in-school, after-school, weekends, and then the summer program. And we have some communities, Kalispell up in Washington State is primarily only doing Project Venture in their summer program, but you know, that's not ideal, and we've been really trying to help them expand because they have their own tribal school, and I would love to see them integrate Project Venture into the school year program so they would have a year-round program with the same group of kids. But you know, you do what you can do, and so they've been mainly focusing on the summer program for their Project Venture implementation, although I would really encourage them to try to figure out a way to do the whole year-round program. It sounds like more work, but it would actually be a benefit in the end to their tribal school to implement it year-round. But I can understand their reluctance to do that. It sounds like a lot more work and more money and stuff required, but the benefits would more than pay for themselves. So you know, we're working on that, trying to offer what help and support we can to maybe get them in a place to do that eventually. But I just wanted to make a distinction there that it's not like one or the other as far as I'm seeing the question written out here. There isn't, ideally you would want to have all those components in school, after school, weekends, and summer in a program. And, you know, some people might only be able to start out with doing something in the summer, but to really get the maximum benefit of the program, you would really want to do the whole year-round package.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Do we have any more questions in the audience? Well, if not, I guess that's a good indication that we're going to be able to wrap this up. And I strongly encourage everyone to download those resources and share them with members of your community advisory committee if you're trying to make a decision about utilizing Project Venture and evidence-based intervention. Strongly suggest that. And lastly, we do have